So ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the United States has put sanctions on you personally and your staff regarding your investigation in Afghanistan. How much is this changing the work that you're having to do?
First, the visa restrictions, the threats, and the other measures that have been announced by the US are naked attempts to interfere with the court's judicial and prosecutorial independence in an effort to achieve their preferred outcomes. This is clearly the intention. And again, we express profound regrets at the announcement of these further threats and these unprecedented coercive actions, including threat of financial measures against the court and the officials of the court by the government of the United States, not least given that country's longstanding contribution to the field of international criminal justice. So the extension of travel bans to families of targeted ICC personnel doing their jobs honorably as upstanding professionals is also quite shocking as collective punishment, and that cannot be left uncontested. We hope that the US administration reconsiders its approach towards the ICC.
Now,
And
now
yes.
the visa ban is directly on you as well. You are unable to go to the United States under these measures and the rest of your team. Would you invite the US authorities, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Donald Trump himself perhaps, to come to the International Criminal Court, to invite them to see what happens at the court?
Let me start on this the measures against me personally, and this is something that unfortunately I do not wish to discuss or even elaborate publicly. But let me say this: you are aware of the travel ban, of course, that is placed upon me, which means that I cannot travel to the US with the only exception of UN-related business, which is guaranteed under the UN Headquarters Agreement. And as I mentioned, all these measures and threats are designed to intimidate and to make our jobs difficult to achieve certain outcomes. When working for the court, we all have an oath to honorably and with professionalism serve that mandate and that privileged position. And that is what we have done, and that is what we will continue to do. With respect to inviting the US to discuss this, let me also remind you that the court works on the principle of complementarity and cooperation. And as mentioned, our mandate and approach to exercise that mandate requires and favor communication and interaction with all stakeholders, in particular, the states that are involved. And this has always been our modus operandi. We never rush decisions. We take informed decisions only after a thorough and independent analysis of information and evidence before us. And that process includes engaging with all stakeholders. Perhaps I should, I should add here that in terms of reaching out to the general American public, the bar associations, and other constituencies, the public record demonstrates that I have always shown openness to engage and have personally given many lectures and presentations in the US before Congress staffers, the bar associations, the think tanks, universities, American Bar Association, the American Society of International Law, which I should mention, an honorable member of. So you name it. I have had dialogue, and communication can always be very, very helpful as long as that communication is based on mutual respect and respect for our respective independent mandates and the requirements of the Rome Statute.
But the attacks on
What we
you,
don't
the attacks on you and the court, though, aren't coming from American bar associations and the American legal community. They're coming from the White House, from the most senior political figures. So do you think that there is scope for you to have direct contact with them, or for the court to have direct contact with the White House to prevent this situation getting even worse?
In all situations, we engage with all stakeholders in the independent exercise of our mandate. We are a professional prosecuting office. Unlike others, we don't have an agenda. We have a legal mandate, and in the exercise of that mandate, we try to engage with all stakeholders, including the states that are involved. We have an open door policy, and we always are open to keep those channels of communication open. And this, however, should not be interpreted as allowing interference in our processes. We approach all situations in good faith and with clean hands. And this engagement is helpful to us in our application of the legal criteria of the Rome Statute, including on the questions of complementarity. In other words, what the national authorities have done to address the atrocity crimes that fall under our mandate. And we are engaged, for instance, in that process with Afghanistan. I don't see why it should be different with the US. We are following and we are acting within the confines of this judicial mandate.
But would you welcome a meeting with someone like Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to explain this face to face with him?
I do not really need to have any direct meeting with them. We are doing our work. The Rome Statute is very clear. I believe that there are very, very competent international lawyers in the US to know the kind of engagement that is required when these cases do take place. And we are just continuing to do our work. But as I said, always open to engage and always open to talk.
You say that the work, I mean, the philosophy of the ICC is to conduct investigations without fear or favour. But this must have put a cat among the pigeons at the ICC. Are your staff afraid of what's happening and the sanctions that are being put on them?
Look, I mean, the US exactions we see are unprecedented in international law, and they are contrary to international law. And this sets a very wrong example for the leadership of any other country whose leadership feels their interests are threatened by the work of the ICC. But let me just repeat what we have said before in reaction to these exactions, that the ICC stands firmly by its staff and officials and remains unwavering in its commitment to discharging independently and impartially the mandate that has been bestowed upon it by the Rome Statute and the states that are party to the Rome Statute. Because these attacks constitute an escalation and unacceptable attempt to interfere with the rule of law and the court's judicial proceedings. They are announced with a declared aim of influencing the actions of ICC officials in the context of the court's independent and objective investigations and impartial judicial proceedings. We will continue, as we have said, we will continue to honorably, the staff will continue to do that, to honorably serve that mandate and that privileged position. But they are attacks that we know, unfortunately, comes with the territory of what we are doing. And we have to always find a way to see how we confront them. It shouldn't mean that we should halt our investigations or stop our investigations and not be able to do that. Far from it. It gives us more resolve to do our work as we were set up to do.
So there was a letter of 67 ICC member countries, signatories to the Rome Statute, that came out in support of the court. But as you mentioned, there's 123 members. Does that concern you that just over half of the countries that are members of the ICC signed that letter of support and that the others didn't feel they could sign their name to it?
Well, I think we need to be clear about what that statement signified, at least to my mind. I believe that this was a very clear statement of support from a significant number of the court's states parties representing different regional groupings. You mentioned the 67. It's over half of the states parties of the Rome Statute. But what is significant to know also is that the signatories included NATO allies of the United States, including Canada, the European partners, including France and the UK, which are permanent members of the UN Security Council, including Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Chile, and a number of African states, including the Gambia, Senegal, South Africa, just to name a few. And you will also be aware of the president of the Assembly of States Parties, who issued a statement, a very strong statement, following the announcement of the executive order on behalf of all of the states parties, all of the Assembly of States parties, the membership. So I believe a proper reading is that the court benefits from strong state party support. You have seen the reactions and you have seen the strong support for the ICC and the widespread condemnation of the latest US announcement. We look to the court states parties to continue to stand firmly by the court and its personnel who are in the trenches, who are doing their job honorably with independence and objectivity in accordance with the Rome Statute. So let me just seize this occasion to call for greater interaction with the International Criminal Court and the hope that more states from all regions of the world will accede to the Rome Statute. And similarly, I invite all states to adopt appropriate measures and strategies to end impunity and thereby contribute to the prevention of the commission of international crimes, including through ensuring the adequacy of their domestic laws and legal systems to properly investigate and prosecute atrocity crimes. The ICC, you will agree, is an important pillar of a rule-based international order and the international rule of law. It is there for the benefit of humanity, for the hope of a more just world. Let me just here quote my dear friend, the late Kofi Annan, when he said on the occasion of the negotiations of the Rome Statute, and I am quoting him directly, when he said that in the prospect of an international criminal court lies the promise of universal justice. And he said, we are close to its realization. And we ask you to do your utmost in our struggle to ensure that no ruler, no state, no junta, no army anywhere can abuse human rights with impunity. Only then will the innocent, distant wars and conflicts know that they too may sleep under the cover of justice, that they too have rights. End of quote. The ICC contributes to global security through its important mandate, and it deserves all of our support. And for us, on our part, we will continue to work responsibly and professionally, by the four corners of our mandate under the Rome Statute.
So while you continue to work, one of the questions is about the potential for investigations into Palestine and the alleged crimes that might be being committed there even to this day. And the US would back its Israeli partners in that, we assume. How complicated have these sanctions and the threat of future sanctions potentially, how complicated does that make the source, the case of any investigation in the Palestinian territories?
Well, I mean, it is no secret that the administrations in the United States and the State of Israel are coordinating their reactions and their policies towards the court. And both is with a view to achieve set goals, which appear to be aligned and connected with the two situations currently before the court. You mentioned them, the situation in Afghanistan and Palestine. This is not a speculation, as you rightly know. It is part of the public record, actually. And you should be directing your question to representative of both states for more details. But what I can say with full confidence is that both sides know or ought to know that we are a professional office doing our job dispassionately with no agenda other than honorably fulfilling our legitimate duties under the Rome Statute. The Israelis are fully aware, and again, this is already a matter of public record, that during the preliminary examination phase, we regularly interacted with Israeli representatives as we did with the Palestinians. And that process was helpful to our independent and impartial assessment of the legal criteria. Let me repeat again, the court is a non-political body and it acts strictly within the legal framework and the jurisdictional competence that is bestowed upon it by the Rome Statute. This is how we work.
Finally, prosecutor, your mandate as prosecutor is coming to an end soon. What do you make of a new prosecutor that comes in? What are the person that replaces you during this process that will happen at the UN in New York? What do you think a new prosecutor needs to bring to the ICC?
I must say now that after a few years, my mandate has been 9 years after serving. I still have 1 year to go. But after all these years at the ICC, I would say that it has been a privilege and an honor for me to serve in this position. And I do believe that what is critically important is that every step that a prosecutor will take in this situation will be fully backed by the law and will be strictly within the confines and limitations of the Rome Statute. We cannot go outside of that. We cannot do politics. We cannot be involved in politics. We are guided by a judicial mandate and the legal framework, and every prosecutor must make sure that this is upheld. This is what I have tried to do. This is what I will continue to do until the end of my mandate. I believe that it's critically important to always show that this is a judicial institution. This is not a political institution. We don't do politics. We are a court of law.
International Criminal Court prosecutor Fatou Bensouda, thank you so much for your time and joining us today.
Thank you for having me.